Welcome to the Mars Loci, where we talk about Mars, all things Mars. And the first question I usually ask, or always ask as a matter of fact, is who wants to go to Mars? The answer is probably a lot, hopefully a lot of people. We need a representation of a different planet that comprises of many people, many different styles of people, many walks of life. But I think the key is that most of the people that are going to want to go to Mars are going to want to go there to start anew in life, to do something more than they could do on Earth, to be settlers, to be the first ones there. Those are the people of risk, the people willing to go and try their best to make something out of nothing. And Mars has nothing right now. So I get a good shot of that, that's for sure. I don't think that in the first wave of settlers on Mars, we're going to see a lot of people from the really developed countries. I think that we're going to see a lot of people that are living in strife, want a better life, and are hoping for a chance of something brand new. Now, the issue with that, of course, is that typically if we attract people from different strata of humanity, there's an educational value that we lack, or that we'll miss. People in third world countries that really want to have a better life don't always have the opportunity to have a lot of education. And to embark on a journey, such as repopulating Mars or populating Mars, without a lot of knowledge backgrounds, is a difficult thing. It was hard way back when settlers came, to places for the first time, like, the lands of United States and America. But now, with technology that is leading the way, people coming on board or on the train to go to Mars that don't understand technology, that's a problem. That's a problem. And I don't know exactly how we get around it. I think we'll talk about that in future episodes. But right now, we just look at it as a situation that we have to remedy, because it's very important for the people that go onto Mars to understand A, what they're getting into, B, how to accomplish being successful, and C, having enough imagination to understand how to accomplish that and to work within the confines of what we know, what technology is. So, I think one of the very first things we'll need to do, as we start developing Mars, is we need to start developing a way to feed ourselves on Mars. Very important. Mars doesn't have an atmosphere that'll produce any crop that I know of. If it produces anything at all, it'll be some kind of algae or something. I don't know. I haven't heard that, but it's possible. It's certainly possible it can do something like that. We know that life on Earth has formed and survived on horrendous conditions. I mean, you've got life forming around volcanic vents that the temperature ranges would burn a human being. Yet there's life that's just surviving and thriving on those vents. And there's, microbes that are living way underground. I mean, hundreds of feet, thousands of feet underground. No oxygen. So, they're doing it through a variety of different means. And they're surviving. Now, will that necessarily help us initially? Probably not. You're not going to be able to eat a lot of algae and survive on it. You need to have some food that'll make a difference to you. So, one of the things we need to look at is agriculture. Some of the first people over are going to have to figure out, and it'll probably have to be assessed and developed beforehand, is how to have crops. It's not very practical to put a crop under a dome, and that's the only way you can really control, the atmosphere. So we're going to have to use aeroponics and hydroponics to do these things initially, and it may work out fine, even in the long run. We're doing so in the United States. We have what they call vertical farming going on right now. A lot of people don't know that. Vertical farming has been around for several years. It's been limited success. Some of it's successful, some of it's not, for a variety of reasons. And what that is basically they take a building and they recondition the entire building so that they grow these crops vertically in different floors and different levels. And they control the atmosphere, they control the moisture, they control the water, and the crop can grow. They can grow crops 12 months out of the year. They don't have to worry about winter time. They don't have to worry about other things. However, there is some issues with that. Yeah, the very principle of being grown inside a building means that it's going to expend energy controlling the environment within that building. So that's a downside to it. Right now, what they've been able to do with vertical farming is pretty remarkable. A lot of people don't know it, but the typical farmer in the United States can grow enough food for 166 people per farmer. That's phenomenal. 2% of the farmers in the United States grow food for the other, population. In excess, as a matter of fact. We actually export about 25% of our crops. It's amazing. Now, we use a lot of land for that. The United States has somewhere about 1.3 or 1.4 billion acres of land. Okay, it's a lot of land. But farming takes up close to 50%, depending how you look at it. And not all farming is farming for crops. I mean, a lot of the farming would be for cows, where they have hundreds of acres of just grass, but they consider that farmland. So it's a lot of land. It's close to 1 billion acres of land, depending on which state. It looks at maybe more than 1 billion in the United States that's successful with farming. So it's certainly important for us to see exactly what's going to work and what will work better. Now, even though the farmers in the United States, and farmers in general around the world because of better equipment, are growing enough food to actually feed 166 people, if you look back to 1990, 1890s, early 1900s, a farmer was feeding 26 people. So we've done better. We've gone from 26 people to 160, 170, depending on what averages you're looking at. So that's a pretty successful record. Now, if you look at vertical farming is anywhere from 50 to 100 times as efficient. That's pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable. So 1 acre will feed 160 people. 1 acre of vertical farming, if you want to figure it out that way, will feed 1,600 or 1,600 or 16,000. I mean, it just, boggles your mind just what it'll do. So let's look at the drawbacks right now of vertical farming. One of the main issues with vertical farming is that certain crops lend themselves to this very well. Things like tomatoes and leafy vegetables and stuff, they all grow great in vertical farming. Plants that are tubular, like potatoes, not so hot. Hard time growing a potato in the air. And that's pretty much what hydroponic or aeroponic farming is. So let me explain to you what they mean by aeroponic farming. Essentially what they do is they take the plant on some form of stand, and they let the roots grow in the air. So the roots aren't even attached to land. That's aeroponic. And what they do is they spray water with nutrients on those roots, and it grows in the air essentially. And a lot of plants, love that. They grow great like that. But not all plants, like I said. So that's aeroponic. Hydroponic's a little different. Hydroponic uses some material. It could be a lot of different stuff. They use vitamass. They use stuff that's inert material, some living material, root, or they crush up things, and they add the moisture to this, and the plant grows within that. But it's a moisture continually circulating through those systems that keeps those plants active or growing. And then, of course, they use artificial light tuned to the right frequencies to do this. They control the temperature, they control the pressure, the humidity, obviously, and they have the light that shines for the optimum amount of time. So the plant can grow. We can grow, instead of 1 crop a year, they can grow multiple crops a year. So it's got a lot of advantages to it. Now, let's translate that to Mars. Because in Mars, we're going to need to do certain things, and crops are certainly one of them. Initially, we'll bring over a lot of food that's in the form of pastes. Get up in the morning, you have yourself a nice breakfast paste. And then in the afternoon, you have stuff like a little steak paste. Unfortunately, I think paste in and paste out, so that's a problem. I think that probably the best idea for crops on the New World, on Mars, would be to have some form of a boring machine that can bore a circumference of, no ideal in this yet, but let's say it's 5 foot in diameter, just just start. So we can take a 4-foot boring piece of equipment, designed for this, of course. It'll bore down into the earth, in this case down into Mars, and go down whatever, 50 foot, 80 foot, 100 foot out, whatever's ideal. So now we have the dirt displaced. We can use that for different things, and we have a hole in the ground, essentially. So what we can do with this hole in the ground is really several things, at least three things. Number one, we can set it up so we can grow crops vertically along the walls of the hole. And we can certainly, see what kind of crops grow best. We can use the natural, dirt from Mars if it's suitable, or we can replace with, the aeroponics or hydroponics. That's a pretty straightforward thing. One of the advantages of a round hole sunk down into the earth is that we can control what goes down and what comes up in that hole pretty efficiently by installing somewhat of a elevator in the center and perhaps some robotic attachments to it, so that you can certainly have a human go up and down it, but you could operate uninhabited for lengths of time where arms could be run down the center and pick out a crop, identify a crop that was red and ready to pick, and continue that process for indefinitely. And you could do different levels for different crops. You could do a lot of different things on this. I have a feeling that over a period of time, you can probably even figure out how to grow the tubers and the stuff that doesn't grow well, in these holes. And maybe they have to be bigger around and shallower or whatever. But to grow a potato and stuff, takes a certain amount of dirt around it. And I think that can be achieved. But that also allows you to seal that little hole. Within that sealed chamber, you can pump in whatever, oxygen needed to keep the plants going and healthy. You can achieve the humidity in that same little container and that volume of space. And plus, since it's underground, it's got a lot of insulation around it, so it's going to hold that temperature pretty well under there. The other factor is that you're controlling everything around it. You're actually putting a light down the center of it, so you're controlling how much light it's getting. And you can do a lot of different stuff with technology as far as like moving plants around, picking the plants that are ripe, planting new plants, making sure the plants were healthy and take away the ones that weren't healthy. So what that means is that we could dig, 5 of these holes on Mars and feed 50 people. Just give an example. Pretty impressive, and we can do that. Now, you can even go farther than this. You can take that same hydroponic or aeroponic shaft, and you could take the shaft, and halfway down the shaft, you could fill it with water. Okay? And in that water, you could do hydroponics, aeroponics, or whatever, and you could also do fish, okay, which is aquaponics. So you've got it all put together, and there's a lot of advantage to doing that. You're keeping the water oxygenated, you're keeping the entire apparatus at a certain temperature. So now you're growing fish, you're growing plants, you're doing it in the same environment. Whether you use the raw dirt at the edges of this hole, or if you insert some kind of a liner into it, that's really something that has to be experimentally, fooled with. But in either case, I'm sure there's ways to keep that fairly concise. So I think this is the way we could actually go in there and start doing elementary growing of crops. Almost automated. It's one of those things that you can do pretty quickly. In fact, because of the hydroponic scenario, you can grow a lot of crops within a few months. So that's pretty impressive. However, obviously it's something that has to be set up initially. You have to have some of the equipment that will go and help develop that. And we'll have to do a lot of experiments on Earth so we can take that there and have it be efficient, pure and simple. So that's one of the ways that we can go over there and start sustaining ourselves on Mars with our own food. We can continue that to a variety of different things. I think that livestock would be a little farther down the road, but livestock needs plants. You have cows, you have to have plants for cows. So you can incorporate these type of things back and forth pretty quickly. I believe that the livestock will have to be underground or in tunnels. I don't see them surviving very well in the bubbles. And if we do indeed, build bubbles or some kind of buildings on Mars, and we will, I have no doubt. I think they're probably mostly geared toward humans. Humans want to see out, they want to have nice things, they want to look nice and pretty. Animals can be in a cave as long as it, has their needs and their comforts in mind, whatever those needs happen to be. So I think those are some initial things that you can expect to see. And I believe that Alon's a smart guy and he'll help figure that out. And I'm available, by the way, Alon, if you need to help figure out more stuff. But the deal is that the people that go there have to have some specific things in mind they want to accomplish. And that's the whole idea of settlers. The original settlers that came to the United States, some of their original premise was freedom of religion. That was important to them, and they were willing to sacrifice everything for that freedom of religion. And I think we're going to see a lot of that on Mars also, but in different forms, in different formats. And once again, I see some of the first important things that the settlers may, try to do, or try to make their mark on society, is to develop mining operations. Some of the stuff on Mars, could be very valuable. And, whether it's gold, uranium, platinum, some kind of rare minerals and metals, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I suspect it won't take long once we get up there to try to fool around and see what's out there. And the better tools and the quicker they can get it, the better it is. So I suggest that the farming scenario should be one of the very first things they look at when they go up there. Power, very important. We covered this in one of our previous podcasts. But even the farming, takes the power. You can't have lights, you can't have air conditioning, you can't have oxygen. You have to have power first. Power's the first, food second. And as far as water goes, there's a lot of ways to achieve that. And my understanding is that there's a fair amount of water locked on Mars. It's just a question of finding it and developing it and, having it available for the people, pure and simple. So I think those are important things. I think you can actually, develop a lot of strategies just based on those elements, so we can get that going on some of the first ships we get up there and some of the first establishments, we put on Mars. We haven't talked much about the legalities of anything, and I think there's a lot to talk about on legalities. But at this point, I think it's important that we survive. Without food, pretty tough. So I think we need to get our food scenario under control. We need to see how that strategy would work, how much we can develop automation to make that strategy easier, so that we can drill the hole, start the plants, and pick them, and inspect them, without a huge amount of human involvement in that. Every day down the shaft, so to speak, going to the shaft daily. We don't want our farmers to be shafted, so that's a big thing. So basically, I think that the two elements we start with are going to be power and food. And one form of food is plants, and plants derive everything. Without the plants, you can't have the animals. And it'd be very nice to be in Mars and not have a pay steak. Much rather have a real steak than a pay steak. Anyhow, tell me what you think of that. Some of you have any ideas, and I'd love to see what your thoughts are. Once again, I want everybody that is thinking about going to Mars, or has an idea about going to Mars, or has an idea why or why not want to go to Mars. At the end of this podcast, you've got a little blurb that tells where to send it to, where my email is. And we'd love to hear from you. And we appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Steve Schultz signing out.